Imagine sitting across from a man chatting about life, laughing over a beer, never realizing he had decapitated women and kept their heads in his apartment. This isn't fiction. This was Edmund Kemper, the co-ed killer, a man so intelligent, so unassuming that police officers themselves counted him as a friend. Yet behind the calm voice and polite smile, he was one of the most sadistic murderers in American history. Edmund Emil Kemper III was born on December 18, 1948, in Burbank, California. His childhood was marked by instability. His father, a World War II veteran, eventually left the family, unable to handle his wife's verbal abuse. That left young Ed in the hands of his mother, Clarnell, a woman described as domineering, emotionally cruel, and constantly drunk. Clarnell belittled him daily, telling him he was ugly, unlovable, and destined to be alone forever. She locked him in the dark, cold basement at night, not because he had done anything wrong, but because she feared he might harm his sisters. At just 10 years old, Kemper's fascination with death surfaced. He cut the head off his pet cat and kept it hidden in his closet. Later, he buried another cat alive. These weren't random acts of cruelty. They were early rehearsals for the horrors to come. By 15, Kemper had grown into a massive figure, already over 6 feet tall, weighing more than 200 pounds. That year, after an argument with his grandmother while visiting his grandparents' farm, something inside him snapped. He grabbed a rifle and shot her in the head as she sat at the kitchen table. When his grandfather came home, Ed shot him too, claiming later he didn't want his grandfather to see the body. Instead of prison, Kemper was sent to the Atascadero State Hospital for the criminally insane. There, doctors discovered his astonishing IQ, 145, and noted his ability to manipulate people. He studied psychology obsessively, learning exactly what psychiatrists wanted to hear. By 21, after convincing doctors he was rehabilitated, Kemper was released. His juvenile record was wiped clean. No one in the justice system knew they had just set a calculating predator loose. After his release in 1969, Kemper moved back in with his mother in Santa Cruz, California. Their toxic relationship only worsened. She mocked him constantly, telling him no woman would ever want him. And in a bitter twist, she worked at a local university surrounded by exactly the kind of young women he felt rejected by. In the early 1970s, Santa Cruz was a hotspot for hitchhiking. Students thought nothing of getting into a stranger's car. To them, Kemper seemed harmless, a tall, friendly man with a deep, calm voice. At first, he picked up hitchhikers and let them go, testing his ability to gain their trust. But soon, he stopped letting them go. Between 1972 and 1973, he murdered 6 young women. He would drive them to isolated areas, pull out a gun or knife and kill them, often strangling them to death. Kemper didn't just kill. He dismembered his victims, keeping body parts as trophies. He kept heads for days, sometimes talking to them, sometimes using them in sexual acts. He photographed his victims after death, revisiting the images to relive the murders. The cruelty wasn't impulsive, it was methodical. He had learned in the hospital how to avoid leaving evidence. He knew police procedure, and he was careful to maintain his image as the gentle giant in public. One of the most chilling parts of his story is how close Kemper was to the investigation without anyone suspecting him. He often spent evenings at a bar called the Jury Room, a favorite hangout for off-duty cops. They knew him as Big Ed, the guy who loved talking about crime cases. Little did they know, they were discussing his crimes with him. In April 1973, after years of festering hatred, Kemper finally turned his rage on the person he blamed most for his pain, his mother. Late one night, while she slept, he took a hammer and crushed her skull, then slit her throat. He decapitated her and used her head as a dartboard, later saying he screamed at it for hours. As if that wasn't enough, he called his mother's best friend over, murdered her too, and left her body in a closet. His plan was to make it seem like the two women had gone away together. After the murders, Kemper drove to Colorado, but instead of going into hiding, he stopped at a phone booth and called the police, confessing everything. At first, they thought it was a sick joke. It wasn't until he described crime scene details never released to the public that they realized the truth. Their drinking buddy, Big Ed, was the killer. In total, Edmund Kemper murdered 10 people: his grandparents, 6 college students, his mother, and her best friend. He was found guilty of 8 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. Even in prison, his intelligence and charm stood out. He recorded hundreds of audiobooks for the blind, spoke calmly in interviews, and often reflected on his crimes in disturbing detail, as though he were analyzing a case study rather than his own life. Ed Kemper remains one of the most unsettling serial killers in history, not just for the brutality of his crimes, but for how easily he hid his darkness. He was the man who would hold a door for you, and the man who might kill you as soon as you got in his car.